Now, what year was this that you finally got caught by the FBI and cooperated?
88 plus 9, 97.
Okay, 97.
Mm-hmm.
So during your years when you were still working with the KGB, did you ever have any communication or any kind of run-ins with Vladimir Putin?
No. Vladimir
Was he working in Germany at that time?
Yeah, he was stationed in Germany in a city that is about 60 miles from where I grew up. I grew up in a small village, but that was one of the closest cities. He got there in 85. I was already here in 85.
Okay, so you never had any sort of communication.
But just to volunteer some information about what he did there, he would have been the kind of person that, let's say, if I study in Dresden, it's a good possibility that he would have been the one who I would be working with, because the fellow that worked with me was a generalist. You know, in these outposts, they didn't do a lot of espionage work. It was East Germany. You don't spy on the East Germans, right?
Mm-hmm.
You maintain a relationship with the Stasi. You may meet somebody from West Germany who comes to visit, or you may actually, operate as a courier for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the work was maintenance, bureaucratic work, and working with trainees like me.
Right.
And so this is what Putin did, I guarantee you. He was mid-level. He wasn't even in charge.
Right.
And so the myth that is floating around about Putin, the 10-foot-tall KGB agent, is exactly that. It's a myth. Right. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans have bought into this. A lot of top-level politicians and journalists. When I first got interviewed about this Ukraine thing, the interview always started, so how did the KGB, the time in the KGB, enable Vladimir Putin to do what he's doing now? And my answer is not at all.
Right.
The only thing that helped him, having been a member of the KGB, he networked with people who, when the Soviet Union went bust, and when the industry was privatized, and when there was politics that you could get into, guess who had the best chances? Because the KGB hired nothing but the top people, the elite. And KGB actually, a lot of KGB knew how the West functions and how you can, become a capitalist or an oligarch. Mm. So this network, there's still residues of that network that works with Vladimir. But all the other stuff his ability to manipulate and play chess and intimidate and be brutal, that was not developed in the KGB.
Do you think it's possible that the person that Vladimir Putin is today do you think it's possible that that's a result of the United States constantly trying to destabilize Russia since, for decades, and constantly, antagonizing Russia and doing all the things that we've done? You could talk about like the coup in the Ukraine and, putting anti-ballistic missiles and or defense missiles that could easily be transitioned into offensive missiles all throughout NATO, and pushing them and backing him into a corner, so to speak. Do you think it's possible that who he's become today is an effect of all of that history?
It's an excellent question. First of all, just to lay the foundation, in the Russian national psyche, there is a lot of paranoia about being attacked, because Russia, since its founding, has always been attacked from the north, the Vikings, from the east, the Mongol hordes, and from the west, Adolf Hitler. The south, there was always war, and so there is a reasonably based fear amongst Russians, and most likely Vladimir Putin, of being under attack.
Right.
Vladimir Pozner, I don't know if that name rings a bell. He's He's a bilingual. He's actually trilingual. He speaks fluent and almost accent-free Spanish, French, German, and Russian and French, Russian, and English. He during the time of the Cold War, he ran a program on U.S. television with a very, very famous talk show host whose name I can't remember. Vladimir Posner knew his stuff, and he knows his stuff, and he is not necessarily Russian, and he's not anti-American. He has a higher level view, and he gave a lecture at Harvard University maybe 3-4 years ago, and I watched it on YouTube, and he points out that yes, there is at least part of what's going on right now can be attributed back to the actions and the words of the United States. Now, I also believe that Putin may not necessarily believe the entire story, but he's using it because his people believe it. You know, you have the NATO expanded right to the border of Russia, and we're not really admitting this right now in the open. I don't know. I haven't heard any American politician to even address this in some way. I am thinking it is not. It was inevitable. I'm thinking it contributed, and I'm thinking again it had something to do with the lack of understanding how Russia operates. And Posner pretty much made the same case in his address to Harvard.
Mm. And another interesting, like I mentioned to you earlier, watching the 6 hour of sit down interviews between Vladimir Putin and Oliver Stone, is it seems like he does have the best interest for Russia, like whether he's putting on a tremendous act and being being unbelievably deceptive and manipulative and putting on a show, if that may be the case, then, it is what it is. But it seemed like I was convinced that, he does have the best in mind for Russia. And again, talking about his perspective of the United States, it seemed to be sound for what it's worth. It seemed like it was very logical. And, he's a guy who has to deal with a new president every 4 years. And he watches this cycle happen every 4 years, and his perspective on during every U.S. election cycle, they have to demonize Russia. It's what they do. We're used to this from the United States, and it just seems kind of like silly in a sense, like from his perspective, looking back at the United States, as kind of like they're playing games. I'm trying to run this country as it should be. But again, that's only one perspective.
There's a lot of thoughts that came to my mind as he was speaking. First of all, he's not stupid, and unless he ignores history, he should know that the United States, other than in Vietnam, has not been an aggressive country. We went into Kuwait and withdrew. We went into Iraq and withdrew. We didn't take any oil out. So when you're talking about playing games, yeah, he should know that these are games, right? And that American politicians have a big mouth, and they always want to blame Russia and paint Russia as the main enemy, which is not the case anymore, by the way. Now everybody pretty much agrees that China is the biggest adversary. So there's some cynicism, I believe, in Vladimir's head. Also, one other thing I want to say, regardless of what the contribution of American foreign policy and military policy was, this does not excuse Mr. Putin going after a sovereign country and killing innocent civilians. And oh, by the way, if he really is so concerned about Russian people, he's killed quite a few Russians in the Ukraine. for sure.
Mm.
And I didn't watch the interview, but there is an article that he wrote. He probably didn't write it, but he put his name under it, where he clearly lays out what his goal is in life, and it is rebuilding Greater Russia, uniting all the Russians that originally were part of, when Russia was formed, it was the organization was called Rus, R-U-S. And they had Ukrainians and Russians and other nationalities mixed in. And then throughout history and with all these wars, they split up. And then the Soviet Union came back and united them all by force very often. And then the Soviet Union collapsed. And now what Vladimir Putin wants to do is recreate a cultural, unified Russia, a paradise for the Russian Orthodox sort of religion and culture, and make it all good for all Russians.
Mm.
But there's a strong personal impetus at work here. He also wants to build for himself a monument that could be put next to Peter the Great.
He wants to recreate the Soviet Union, right?
I say Russia, Greater Russia, not the Soviet,
Russia. Okay.
because there are in the Soviet Union there are about a handful of Asian republics that have an Asian population. He's not so much interested in the Asians, and that possibly would create a conflict with China anyway.